We are creatures of desire. What we most desire is meaning. What makes us suffer most is a lack of meaning.
The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. Marital therapist, author, and communications trainer Andrew G. Marshall invites guests from all walks of life to discuss what makes life meaningful.
Hello, I'm Andrew G. Marshall. Welcome to The Meaningful Life. We're available on Apple, Spotify, Podbean, and wherever you find your podcasts. What's the number one relationship issue affecting couples today? According to my witness today, it is stress. After all, it makes us both critical of our partner and defensive too. And with those two in the mix, you have a toxic combination. So today we're going to help you identify the stresses in your relationship and offer some tools to navigate through everything without adding to the stress. My witness is ELIZABETH Earnshaw, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist and author of the new book, Til Stress Do Us, How to Handle the Number One Relationship Issue. I love the title, Til Stress Us Do Part, and how true it is. So, Elizabeth, welcome. How did life prepare you to write this book?
I had a baby and my life got crazy.
That's nearly always the way, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, I think that can have a huge impact on people, is a huge life transition, like having a baby.
And we sort of think today, because, we've read all the books, we've seen the videos, we should have it under our belt without too many problems. And babies in particular have a way of sort of getting past all of that and getting us in the rawness, because your son, George, didn't sleep.
Yeah, my first child did not sleep very much at all. He really wanted to be up and with the people, and he also was hard to soothe. So anybody who's had a baby that cries a lot knows that with sleep deprivation and doing something brand new and being out of your normal cycle of life, you can really start to lose your mind.
And you were still working full-time, from what I understand as well.
Yes, I was still working full-time and my husband was working full-time. So it's a lot to juggle. You have a full-time job being a parent and then 2 full-time jobs out of the house.
So paint me the picture of perhaps the worst moment that made you think, I need help, which is really difficult to ask for when you're a relationship expert yourself.
Absolutely. So I think the one blessing was that I am a therapist and a relationship expert. So there was always a part of me that knew there's something wrong with this. So I didn't think that it was permanent. There was always a part of me that had that, right? And I think that that's really a blessing. But there were very big parts of me that thought things like, I want to get a divorce. I want to kill myself. If I got hit by a bus today, I wouldn't mind. And I had those thoughts. Very big parts of me had those thoughts. And because I had that ability to be the therapist who has seen people get through things and seen things improve, I at least had that piece of me that could propel me to get help, or that had some idea that this wasn't my norm, right? So I'm lucky that I had that. But in those moments, I had some pretty dark thoughts and I wanted to make some pretty extreme decisions to get out of my discomfort.
And how did you feel towards your husband?
I was very angry with my husband and frustrated with my husband because it felt like, and I know that this is how a lot of people feel after the birth of their first child, it felt like I was kind of this default. I was the one who was just supposed to be able to do it or supposed to know how to do it. And it's not that he ever necessarily said these things to me, right? Like, you're supposed to be the only one researching and taking care of the baby. I actually have a pretty wonderful husband who wants to be involved. And at the same time, I think the way that society shapes us, I understood that if I don't know something about a baby, I need to research it. I understood that, you do have to get up in the middle of the night to take care of the crying. And that was something I felt like I had to teach my husband, and that my husband often didn't reach for himself. And so I was really angry with him for quite a while.
And he gave the sentence that drove you up the wall, and I've heard many times before, and I have to tell you, I've actually used myself. If you want help, why don't you ask for it?
Yeah.
So explain to me why that is such a terrible thing to say to a stressed woman.
Yeah. So, I think it's complicated. And when I'm talking to couples, I often say, most of the time, we don't mean any harm by the things that we say. And of course, even as a relationship therapist, what I'm often coaching people to be able to do is to ask for help, right? So I'm often talking to people saying your partner cannot read your mind. If you wanted something, you have to say it. And at the same time, I do think that in relationships, especially during moments of transition, it's really important that both people are working to try to know things themselves too, right? And so when there becomes a complete imbalance, it's not just, I wish we were going on more dates and I should tell you that, or it would be really nice if, when I get home from work, you could take the kids for 20 minutes so I could take a break. What he was saying to me is, I want you to tell me everything we have to do about this baby, right? And so it felt like a little bit of a cop out. It wasn't that he actually wanted me to ask for help. It wasn't that, something as simple as, I'm really tired, can you take the baby and I'll sleep? What he was really saying is, I want you to tell me exactly what I'm supposed to do all the time. And the bigger issue was that if I did tell him what to do, he would then dismiss it. And so even if I was doing all of that, which was a ton of work for me to have to do, I would say something like, I really can you get to the dishes tonight so that I can have a break? And he would say, there's not that many dishes. I'll do it in the morning. And so I think that when there's the combination of somebody's doing everything and they're having to manage how you do things and you're not doing any of the research, and then if they do actually ask for help, and you dismiss it in some way, oh, it can't be because you're tired or the house isn't that messy, or I don't think we really have to do it that way, then I think that's where you end up with the conflict.
And I think I'm going to channel my male clients at this moment, because what they would say is they're not trying to diminish the problem, but they're trying to make it sort of seem digestible. And so they're actually saying, it's not as bad as all that, calm down, we can make it work. So they're trying to be helpful,
Yes.
But what they don't understand is that actually makes things worse.
And what I would say to that male client is, I appreciate that you're trying to make it digestible, but what are you doing to actually digest it? Because I think that's where the breakdown is. If you have a partner who says, you know what, you're right, those dishes need to be done, and I'm going to do them. And I'm not going to do it right now because I also have a headache, or I'm also tired, or I have a paper I have to get in for work, but I'm going to do it. And then they actually do it. You're not going to have the same conflict loop. The issue is that men tend to say things to make it digestible, but they don't digest it. They expect you to digest it on your own. And that is where that lack of trust, because what those types of conflicts really are, is it's a breakdown in trust, because it's a partner, man or woman, saying again and again, that's not a big deal, or I'll get to it, or, I don't know how to do that type of thing. You're better at it, so you should just do it. And the other partner is like, okay, you're going to get to it. They wake up in the morning and it wasn't gotten to. And so the bigger feeling becomes, you actually don't have my back at all. You don't see the way that things are impacting me. And even if you say you do, you don't have my back. And so if somebody feels like another person doesn't have their back, we're going to lose trust.
And that's absolutely key, and when there's a lot of stress around. So let's look at what stress does to us and our communication abilities. Perhaps you can talk us through it.
Yeah. So when we are under a lot of stress, and this is what I try to talk to my couples about, because, men and women, they're both under a lot of stress during major life transitions. We've been talking about the birth of a child, but it could be a hard, a new transition at work. It could be a death that the family is experiencing, and a sickness, anything. During major transitions, when you feel stress, what you will start to notice is that there becomes relationship breakdown often during those times. And it's because our bodies are becoming primed to deal with a threat. And so we are going into a survival mode, and there's a lot of different things going on to help us to survive. But unfortunately, they're not differentiating relational threat from being mugged on the sidewalk. And so we're feeling this threat in our bodies, and it changes the way we think. It changes the way we hold ourselves. It changes our vocal tone, all sorts of things so that we can survive. Well, it's problematic when that happens in a relationship because surviving becomes about winning. And so it's me against you. And you start to develop that type of relationship where it's about winning, one-upping, getting your position heard and your needs met, and not really being able to hear what the other person is saying. And it's because we lose our capacity under stress for humor. We lose our capacity for affection, problem solving, curiosity, because those are all things that we do when we have a second to feel safe and to take a breath. And if we don't feel those things, we just react. So we snap at people, we shut down, we do all of the things that just really aren't helpful, unfortunately.
And make the communication even worse. But there's another thing that's happening inside us, which makes it even worse, is we feel shame about being stressed.
Yeah. So there's kind of like this meta thing where then we also feel shamed that we feel stressed and shamed about how we're acting in those moments as well. And I think probably you're kind of highlighting that because if we feel shame, we're more likely to not deal with something, right? We're going to hide from it and we're not going to want to be seen and we're going to be less vulnerable and more shut down. And so it becomes really difficult to navigate and really multi-layered.
And so at this low point, you were doing the research because that's what your job was. And you came up with this idea of mental load disparity. So tell me about mental load disparity.
So one thing that I was noticing with the couples, I had gone through my own thing and I was working with couples, and there are certain things that people argue about again and again. And maybe you've seen it in your own work, and I'd love to hear what you've seen too. But one of the topics would be kind of around this idea of fairness. And people couldn't really put their finger on it. And it would be a kind of messy conversation because one person would say, but I did it. I changed the light bulbs. And the other person would say, it's not that you didn't change the light bulbs. It's the fact that I had to tell you to change the light bulbs and I didn't notice it. And there would be these kind of crazy conversations because nobody was hearing each other. And from afar, you're thinking, well, the person changed the light bulbs. What's the big deal? Why are you arguing about it? But what it really came down to was that somebody was feeling as if they were having to manage the entire home through thinking about the house, researching what needs to happen in the home. And by the home, I mean the family, researching what needs to happen, delegating the tasks, knowing what needs to happen, paying attention to it, keeping track of it. And all of these things were happening in their mind. And so it wasn't just about a light bulb. It was about the fact that this person, the partner that was overwhelmed by it, was the only one in the house noticing that light bulbs were going out. The only one in the house noticing that socks had been left in the hallway. The only person in the house that was recognizing that no birthday gift had been bought yet for the 6 birthday parties that the kids were going to have to go to over the weekend, which would mean that somebody was going to have to wake up earlier and go to the store and buy the wrapping paper. So it wasn't about whether or not the partner changed the light bulb. It was, are you sharing the task of noticing what needs to be done and thinking through how it's going to be done, thinking through who's going to do it? Or is it just me holding that task on my own? And so once people could talk about it in those terms, what ended up happening was the other partner would be able to come around and say, oh, I actually get it now. And most people do. I mean, most couples don't want to be pitted against each other, right? Most couples I work with, they were arguing about the light bulb. And the second you bring it to the partner's attention, who was like, I don't get it. I do everything you ask me to do. They are able to say, I see that now. I actually see that your deck of cards is this big and that my deck of cards is this big, and maybe that's not fair, and maybe we need to do something about that.
Yes, I've had clients where they've come to the point where she'll do the doctors and he'll do the dentist. So each of them has a share of it. And I think what is difficult is if one person has got to have all the information and the other person is like the slave who's told to do these things, because that's not very equal either.
No, and from the person who is being told, I think probably your male client from earlier, right, that you used as the example, his feeling would be you're kind of always bossing me around. And like, I don't want you to be my mother either. I feel like you don't see me as a peer. You're not. And this is where kind of a breakdown, even in attraction, can happen, where that partner is like, are you attracted to me as a partner? Or are you just kind of seeing me as like an underling who doesn't do what you need him to do, or doesn't measure up or whatever. And then the partner who's always saying, this is what you need to do, they're feeling like, yeah, I do feel like a mother. And I don't know that I feel like we're peers anymore. And so it creates this big rift, not only in the partnership as two people who figure things out together, but also it starts to impact attraction in the relationship.
Yeah, because your mother is not going to be very sexy, and your slave, generally most people don't want a slave, they want an equal partner.
Right. And so it's not a great dynamic in any direction for the relationship.
So once you've sort of identified you have a mental load disparity, how do you actually start negotiating over it? And I'm now going to channel my female clients, because they don't actually trust that if the man says, I'm going to take over X, that he's going to do it, and here I'm going to be slightly judgmental, to her standard.
That's true. That's exactly what ends up happening. And I would say, even though that's like a stereotype, 99% of the couples, when I'm working with them, that is often the female's response is, yeah, well, I do want to give that one up, but I'll just keep that still because the way you do it, I don't like it. Like, I don't like how you cook dinners, or I don't like how you grocery shop.
And I don't agree with what you dress our children in. That's not warm enough. And he wore that for the second day running. And
yes. And would you really send her to school with her hair like that? And you vacuum.
Wet hair.
Corner.
You didn't dry her hair properly.
Dry her hair.
We listen to the same arguments. We have the same clients. Yes. They're seeing us both at the same time.
They're sharing us. They're sharing us. Did you really put her in the mismatched socks? I can't believe you sent her to school that way. So it's really common. What have you done historically when you hear people saying that? What's usually your response?
Well, when we go these arguments that go round and round in circles, I always think I'm going to go deeper. What is this really about? Because there's something deeper underneath there. They sort of know this argument. And I ban people from trying to do a conversation about what is fair, because in the same way, I won't allow people to have an I'm right and you're wrong conversation, because nobody has ever solved anything by deciding who's right and who's wrong. Mm-hmm. And if they're going to argue about what's fair and what isn't fair, well, you're just going to be there till the end of time. So if we're getting into those, I want to go deeper. Why is it so important that the child is in mismatching socks? What's that about? Because generally, what the men say to me is that when my wife is away and I've just got to look after the children on my own, everything goes fairly smoothly. We do it my way, but it sort of works and there's no stress. But when I'm being supervised, there's generally stress and the children play us off against each other. And one of the things that helps, I find, is if we decide who's in charge at any one moment, because if it's unclear who's in charge, then we have all this stress. If it's the man's job to take the children to school, then just let him get on with it. And if it's the woman's task to do it, the man also lets her get on with it. And, asking the question, who's in charge at this moment, is a very quick way of settling the dispute about, how the child is going to be put to bed. If it's my way, because I'm putting the child to bed, and when you put the child to bed tomorrow, you do it your way. And both will work. Generally, children get to bed.
Yeah. And if you're in charge and the way you do it causes difficulties, well, you're in charge. So it's okay. Right. And I think, so what you just said is exactly what I do. I do the same thing. Number one, I want to know what are the life philosophies or kind of internalizations that are fueling this argument in the first place. And the second is kind of more concrete, like what can we actually do? But I really thought what you said about going deeper is sometimes one of the most important parts, because it's not about the mismatched socks. Like you said, the kid goes to school, they're fine. There's obviously a level where you don't want your kid to look like a neglected mess who's going to get bullied at school, of course. But
that doesn't happen in general,
doesn't
does
usually
it?
happen. That's not what's happening in these arguments. If it was, obviously, we would probably say something like, that kind of sounds like it's a little extreme. Let's make sure the kid goes to school in clothes that aren't covered in dog poop or something. But what's mostly happening is if you dig deep on that topic, an example for your listeners of what people might say is one person might say, the reason I get hung up on this is twofold. Number one, I grew up in a family where it showed me love that, my mother took time. She picked our clothes. She was always so sweet with the way she put our socks on. And that means that you love somebody. It means you show them respect. So they would have this life philosophy on what people should do, often based on what they experienced or what they didn't experience. When I was growing up, I had a dad who sent me to school in mismatched socks, and I always felt very unloved by it, might be their response. And so when I see you do that to her, it makes me feel awful. The other could be more in the here and now. When I see you do that, it signals to me that you're not taking the time and effort that I take. And when I start to feel that way, I just get so angry again, because that was part of our issue last year where I was doing all of the work and now you're doing it, but it doesn't seem like you're actually doing it. And so if you get down through that, it's more, I just don't trust you, or this is a signal you don't respect me. And that might not be the case, but that's the perspective. And for the other partner, it might be, I'm actually okay with this because my philosophy is a smooth morning is better than a morning fighting with the kids over their socks. And so what I'm trying to do here, what's important to me, is to have nice time with my kids in the morning. And I think people shouldn't worry so much.
And I sometimes, when we go down there, will get a partner who will say, well, I want to train my children to be self-sufficient. I want them to learn to tie their own shoelaces rather than spending all my time tying it for them. So, I'm trying to encourage them to be self-determinate, I suppose, they don't actually use that word, but that's what they mean.
Yeah, they're saying it's really important to me that they pick their own stuff and that I don't fuss over it. I want them to feel independent. And so those are life philosophies. I always tell couples, your philosophy starts with a should, right? Like to show your children love, you should dress them perfectly. Or to help raise an independent, confident child, you should let them pick their own socks. There's these shoulds, and your shoulds aren't the be all end all. But you think they are. That's how you're arguing, as if they are. And so can we come together and think, how do you create a life together where, for you, Dad, you're wanting to build independence. And for you, Mom, you're wanting to show nurturing. And how do you kind of respect each other's perspectives on that? And the second, which is more concrete, is let's actually decide who is in charge of the meals. Because if it's going to be so-and-so, you have to let them be in charge. And again, there are certain degrees, and I help couples decide what would be completely unacceptable. Well, it's unacceptable to send our kids in clothes that have stains all over them, right?
Yeah. And what kind of food is unacceptable? If you're just going to feed them on crisps, I think we might draw the line at that.
Exactly. It's fine if you order out one night if you're taking control of the meals, but otherwise, let's agree that we're going to cook. Or I don't care if it's McDonald's once a week on a busy school night, but can we agree that it wouldn't be McDonald's every night? And so that's the more concrete. And I think this example you brought up of somebody is in charge of getting the kid ready for school, the other person really needs to butt out, right?
Yeah.
Or if they're in charge of bedtime, and it can be hard, if my husband's in charge of bedtime and I'm downstairs, and this is where that stereotype comes in, if you're not doing it right. If I hear him and my son start to get into it, no, I'm not, I don't want to go to bed like that. And my husband's like, you had enough book. We've already read 2 books. I'm not reading a third. And I'm downstairs and I want to go up and be like, Andrew, my husband, Andrew, I think if you talk to him like this, it would help. Or just read the other book. What's the big deal? But you have to be willing to sit away and say, he's got it. He's taken it off my plate. My son is going to be fine. They're going to learn how to negotiate things with each other in their own relationship. But that's hard. It is truly internally a difficult experience.
So sometimes the mental overload is things that we are doing a land grab on.
Yes. like we're just deciding we want more and more and more and we don't actually need to land grab it. We could have stayed on our own property.
So how do we decide and actually spot where our stressors are?
So there's a lot of different types of stressors in our life. We have external stressors, which are things like the workplace, dealing with your in-laws, the world as a bigger world outside of your home. And then there's internal stressors like we're not having sex anymore. We aren't talking the way that I would like us to talk. We disagree on a life philosophy about how to dress our kids. And so one of the things that I think is important is to really just sit down with yourself or each other and think, where is life causing us stress? Is it happening because of outside things? Are we, short and agitated because work is really difficult or because we're in an argument with our sister-in-law? Or are we short and agitated because every time we try to talk to each other, the kids are disrupting the conversation and we can't connect? And so if you can identify those, and people often have many, then what you can start to do is look at how do we want to navigate these different stressors in our lives? Do we want to get rid of some of them? Do we need to say, I'm not going to be the Boy Scout troop leader this year because it's making us crazy that we have to do this 3 nights a week or whatever? Do we want to start preparing ourselves better for them? We fight every morning about the darn socks. Let's start having socks out on Sunday. Let's put 5 pairs of socks on the dresser so they're there. We don't have to fight. Or do we need to learn how to adapt to these types of stressors in our lives? And what that means is accepting they're real and learning how to communicate with each other in a more warm and effective and regulated manner.
And I think there's something about understanding whether it's chronic stress or just distress that is actually helpful to understand. So not all stress is the same, is it?
Not all stress is the same. And I mean, some stress is really good. So some stress helps us to feel motivated about things and grow and complete projects and all sorts of stuff. And then we do have more acute distress where it's just the day. You had a really bad meeting at work and you just feel awful, or you got off the phone with the teacher of your child at school and they said some things about your kid's behavior and you're upset about it and you're worried about your kid, but it's not something you're dealing with all the time. And then we have chronic stress, which is with us all the time. Been out of a job for a year, not sure where the next paycheck is coming from, a child who has a chronic illness, a constant conflict with family. So there's chronic stress where we're just always under it. And those two things are different because one of them, the stress cycle completes. So I get off that upsetting phone call and I eat dinner and I take a bath. And I wake up the next day, I feel okay. Like all of those stress hormones, they got to do something in my body. They went away, they dissipated. And my brain isn't feeling and my body's not feeling at risk anymore. The chronic stress, you're always under it. And so it's never completing. You're never getting what you just did, like that breath, that sigh of relief. It's just always in your body. And you're therefore always having all of those stress hormones are spiking in your body all of the time. And it's not good for you physically, emotionally, and relationally, like I talk about.
And I think that one of the things that's at the bottom of a lot of this is people feeling that they're not enough.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you help couples with that? Because sometimes there can be some truth in the fact that we're not enough.
Yeah. And so sometimes there's the reality that like we can't do everything and that we aren't going to do everything at a high level. And I think that that is a hard thing for people to accept, especially right now in the world, because there's so much out there in like the media that makes it look like people are doing lots of things at a very high level, but it's just not reality. And one of the things I talk about is this bridging the gap that everybody is constantly feeling like they have to do, where you might want to be exactly like your mom was when you were growing up. Maybe she was a stay-at-home mom and the house was perfectly clean and the clothes were always in the drawers and dinners were always made and there was a cute snack after school. And so you're pushing yourself to do these things, but you're also working a full-time job. So you're bridging the gap between like what's your reality and what you wish things were. And that, as you stated earlier, creates a lot of shame. You feel like I can never keep up. I can't do any of this. Instead of looking and saying like, actually, where am I? What could I integrate that's important with my values while still recognizing that I'm working 40 hours a week. I'm not home working in the home for 40 hours a week, and both are jobs. And so I'm going to have to figure out, what do I do for myself so that I feel like I'm living my values, but not killing myself in the meantime.
So what tools can you recommend?
For navigating, managing stress, or which part?
Yep. Give us the goodies on how to navigate and manage stress, not only our own stress, but the stress between us and our partner.
So a lot of it starts with ourselves. It's being able to recognize first that we're feeling it. A lot of people don't recognize it. They don't know why they're feeling so bad or why they're fighting so much with somebody. And so being able to say to yourself and bring awareness to the fact that you're experiencing a lot of stress helps to make that a part of your focus. So saying, you know what, I've been on edge because I have a lot going on in my life, and working on self-compassion, it makes sense that I'm on edge. It's a lot of things I'm dealing with, a lot of worries that I have, or shame or fear or whatever it is. And then the second piece is recognizing that in order for our bodies, so when you're stressed, it's because your body feels some sort of risk and tension. And for your body to feel safe again, there's certain things that you can do to tell it it's safe. And so on an individual level, you're letting that stress cycle complete by doing things that target either your muscles or your mind or your breathing, because those are the three things that can really get bent out of shape when you're under stress. So muscles would be things like exercise, like running, punching things, stretching, doing progressive muscle relaxation. Breathing, so bringing oxygen into your body because your breath starts to change when you're stressed to a more shallow breathing. And then things with your mind: draw, write, read a book, think about something other than the stress, try to learn something. All of those things tell your body, I'm safe. Because if I was being chased by a lion right now, my body owner wouldn't be doing deep breathing, or wouldn't be coloring, or wouldn't be going for, a yoga class. Like, these are things that you only do when you're safe. So you're signaling. The second thing that's important is, what are we doing between each other? So co-regulation. And co-regulation is when you're recognizing the other person is stressed, and instead of you becoming distressed with them, which is often what people do, one person gets really upset. You can feel it on them. They come in the door and you immediately feel it. And your body, because it feels that, it reacts from a place of stress. So they come in the door, they're grumpy. And instead of saying, hey, how was your day? You say, oh, here you are again, coming in with that attitude. It's because you kind of immediately felt that and you took it on. Recognizing this person just came in, I'm noticing my body, I'm starting to escalate. And so as I feel that, instead of going there with them, I'm going to try to keep myself calm. And in doing that, it actually helps the other person, because it signals to them, you're actually in a safe place. So whatever stress you're walking in with, I'm not meeting you with it. And your stress can recognize we're safe together. And so using a calm voice, giving people space, all of those types of things can help the other person to co-regulate with you.
And one of the problems when we're stressed is we tend to chop things out of our lives. And often they're the things that de-stress us. Mm-hmm. Like, you haven't got time to give the dog the extra long walk that you used to give the dog, and that really used to calm you down. And you cut out the relaxing time between the two of you. That's the thing that I see going over and over again. And we bring our tiredest and most selves together at the end of the day, and there's nothing left to give. How do you avoid that trap?
Yeah, it's challenging, because it's true. When we're stressed and busy, we cut those good things out, or at least the length of those good things that it would really take to get the benefit. And then we also do a few funny things, which is we try to get rid of the stress with fast fixes, which end up causing more stress. So we do things like scroll on our phone or shop, just all of those little dopamine hits, which fill our time with more stuff. And then we're in this horrible cycle and we have less time together. And so one thing I think is really important is truly accepting the reality of your situation. I'm not the therapist that says to a young couple with kids, you should find a way to have a date night every single week and also talk to each other for an hour each night. I'll say ideally you would be able to do that. But if you can't do that, like what can you do? Where can we find pockets where you're willing to set boundaries with the rest of the world? You're willing to maybe experience some loss with some other things. Maybe you are not the top performer at work because you choose to turn your computer off at 7 p.m. so you can actually hang out with your spouse. How can you in reality find time so that you are committing to giving your partner that time and that space, or yourself if it's for you? And we don't need to make it what a book would say. It doesn't need to be that you are doing it for really long periods of time, but anything we can get. And then from there, I try to push them to expand that a little bit more, right? So like, let's be successful in the smallest way possible. And then once you've got that going, like, oh, it feels really nice that you're meeting every Sunday with each other for 2 hours in the morning and talking about things. What would it be like now to maybe have tea at the end of each day? Could you start adding that in? And usually it's a process of kind of having to get in where you can, and then you start helping people remove things from their lives. Do you really need to be on the computer? I know that in the past we were resistant to the idea of closing the laptop at the end of the workday because you felt like maybe you'd get fired. But now that your relationship is starting to feel like more of an important focus, do you really think you would get fired if you started closing the laptop at 7 p.m. 2 days a week? And it just takes some time and some like loosening around these like firm beliefs sometimes to help people make space in their lives where they think that they don't actually have it.
Well, in a moment, we're going to look at a particular problem that sort of highlights all of this and go into it in some detail. And we'll be doing that in just a moment.
The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. Please follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and visit our website, andrewgmarshall.com/podcast, where you can join our supporters club and unlock bonus material and other benefits.
So if you'd like to find out more about how to contact the podcast and send in a letter, you can go to my brand new website, www.andrewgmarshall.com, which has got a full redesign, and I hope you enjoy looking at it. Some good new articles on it. Somebody who went to my website and sent in a letter is this person. Since the birth of our second daughter, we have more or less stopped making love. It happened gradually over a couple of years. Despite our daughter now being 4 and sleeping through most nights, my wife seems to always be tired. I suppose I am too. We both have full-time jobs and there are 1,001 things to do and think about. But I try and make the effort for sex. My wife says she doesn't feel attractive, and anyway she's not in the mood. I tell her I still find her attractive, but that doesn't seem to make a difference. I've suggested dressing up and going out for a night, but my wife says she'd much rather have a good night's sleep. Everything seems to be too much effort. It's like her libido has gone on strike. When we talk, we get nowhere. In fact, it's worse than that. She blames me, and if I'm honest, I blame her too. So we've stopped discussing it. Somehow that's worse than fighting. What do we do?
It's really common. It's a common experience. And the person is highlighting the isolation and distance cascade is what it's called, where things kind of just keep getting more and more muddled, and then you just don't even want to talk about them anymore. And so it cascades into more and more distance as it becomes more and more uncomfortable to talk about. Either uncomfortable because you get into big conflict, or uncomfortable because you can't really find a way to connect on the topic. And so you want to avoid the topic, right? Because of that discomfort. There's so much in there. What are some of your initial thoughts?
Well, my initial thought is that, yes, her libido has gone on strike. And why has it gone on strike? I think that's a really good way of putting it. And I think that's really good to understand. The problem is, as she describes it, you're going to feel that it's all your responsibility. I'm not doing enough.
Yes.
But, and this is something that's really difficult to do, but it's really important when you talk about sex, is she's responsible for her libido and you're responsible for your libido. So It's not up to you to turn her on, and it's not up to her to turn you on. You've got to find the desire for sex within inside you, rather than actually saying it's your job to make me feel in the mood. And so when she describes her lack of desire, you're going to think, oh, I haven't given her enough compliments, or I haven't done this and I haven't done that. And if I was a better lover, she wouldn't feel like that.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're doing is you're immediately hearing all the wrong things. You want to understand her better rather than being defensive. But that's a really difficult thing to do. But that's the task.
And then it makes it become a little messier, right? Because then once the thought process is, I'm not doing enough, or she doesn't desire me, or if I was giving more compliments, then what you're coming to.
Or if I lost 2 kilos.
Yeah, if I was better looking, what you're coming up against then is you feeling like not enough. And that's going to feel like shame. And you're going to react however you react when you feel shame. And so you might become combative, and you might also just become withdrawn. I'm not enough for her, so never mind. Or combative would be, well, I've tried everything, and there's just nothing that works for you, no matter how much I try. So you must just not be attracted to me, and maybe this will never get better. And then the conversation just becomes a cyclical mess. And so, yeah, I think I would think the same thing is, number one, not trying to think, how am I going to turn her on in the traditional sense, but how can I understand her and really hear what's going on for her, not through the lens of why I'm not enough, which is when I'm working with couples, this is a conversation that can quickly go off the rails, where one partner will say their honest truth. They'll say, it's actually not about you. I still think you're handsome or beautiful. I still love you. It is because I feel tired, gross. My body has never felt the same. I feel like I can't really take a shower. I feel like I don't want anybody else touching me.
Well, I've become a mother, for example, and motherhood isn't sexy, is it?
Yeah, I've become a mother. It's not sexy. I wonder if you think I'm unattractive. I'm touched all day by a little kid. I don't want to be touched anymore. I want to just go to sleep. And I think in the note, they said, my wife says that she doesn't want to go on a date. All she wants is a nap, and she wants to go to sleep.
Well, I mean, I can understand that. Because,
Yeah.
And many times a really good sleep is number one on our list of priorities, isn't it?
Yes. And the unfortunate thing is that what will happen when I see this in couples therapy is the partner will say, but that can't be it. Because if you were really into me, like you got a nap yesterday and you still didn't want to have sex. So if you were really into me, that wouldn't be happening. And so they dismiss the reality. And what I would encourage this person to do is really try to take your partner at their word. I don't want to date because I want to sleep. Not I don't want to date because I don't love you. Not I don't want to date because we're never going to have sex again, but because really the best gift you could give me is sleep. And what I would say to this person is the more that you can lean into what your partner is saying, your wife is saying, the less resistance you're going to get down the road. And so if you say, babe, the date sounded fun to me, but if you want to sleep, you know what I'm going to do instead? My parents have been saying that they want to see the baby. You sleep, and instead of a date tonight, I'll take our baby to my parents' house and we'll go hang out there, and you go to sleep early and you scroll on your phone and you watch TV and you do whatever you want to do.
And we'll
go a long
tiptoe
way.
back in and enjoy. And if it's not enough, we can do it for a second time.
Exactly. Because you know what's going to happen after that? It's not that your sex life is immediately going to improve, because again, remember, this isn't about you. And that's another place people get stuck, is they get stuck on, okay, so if I do that, will the issue be better tomorrow? And then they come back for the next session and they say, I did exactly what you said, whether it's about sex or not, anything. I did exactly what you said, and she was still tired this week. And
it's back to those quick fixes again, isn't it?
Yes. And so I say, I know it's like a journey and it's hard. I really want to encourage you, keep leaning into it, because what's going to happen is your wife is going to get not only the sleep she needs, but she's also going to get the understanding, which is sometimes even more important. She's going to walk away going, wow, you're not doing this for me just so you can get sex.
Because I have to say, men don't understand this, actually feeling that this is a smuggling sex into the room. So it's not doing something nice for me. It's actually building up, you owe me.
You owe me. I'm doing this because then you'll do what I am hoping for.
Yeah. And that it's not only is it incredibly unsexy, but it's manipulative as well. And neither of those two things are very good, are they?
No, they're not. And then it increases stress even more, because then what the wife is going to start thinking is, great, I got my nap, but tomorrow he's going to think I'm failing him. And then we've got another person who's failing somebody, right? Which is usually what goes back and forth. I'm failing him because I still don't feel into it. So
what would you say to the woman who's feeling unsexy?
Yeah. So I think that, first of all, fair. I don't fight people on how they feel, right? Like, I would be curious, like, what's going on? What's making you feel unsexy? And, there's a lot of things. They might say my C-section scar healed in a really weird way. And like, actually, it's not comfortable for it to be touched anymore. Or I had tears after the birth and I don't know what I look like down there anymore. And now I feel disgusting. So it could be actual physical things that truly resulted. It could be other things like, I just used to take more time on exercise and I had glowing skin and now I feel like I look run down, or I don't have time. All I'm doing is doing all day. I'm taking care, I'm working. And when I felt my sexiest was when I was relaxed and I would have a day off and I would go to the gym and I would drink a coffee and like sleep midway through the day. And now I don't do those things anymore. And so I would just want to understand. And really, if I was doing couples therapy, I would do that in the presence of the other person and model what it looks like for me to say, that makes a lot of sense. I understand that that's how you're feeling. The thing I would want that partner to be able to understand is that their partner's desire for sex is a real need too. And I think sometimes what can happen is that can get dismissed as kind of a shallow need. You're asking for sex and I'm asking for sleep. And like the thing you're asking for is
unreasonable.
And it can turn into disgust. I'm disgusted with you. Like that's all you want. You look at me and you see how tired I am and that's all you want. I'm mad at you for that. And I would work to help soften that person a little bit to, number one, understanding it feels disgusting when it feels like pressure. I get that. It feels awful when your partner says, take a nap. And then the next day they say, I gave you a nap and you still don't want to do anything. And can we actually empathize with something your partner really misses right now, which is connecting with you sexually?
Yeah, and it is good to have that intimate touch. We all need to feel wanted. Exactly. And we all want to express our love. And for some people, sex is a way of expressing love and getting close. And we get into that terrible cycle. How can we get close if we don't have sex? How can we have sex if we're not close?
Exactly. And that's what's happening between these two people. And if the husband who wrote in wants the possibility of sex to kind of become something more between them, the biggest thing they could do is lean into other types of intimacy for their partner during the time they're saying, I really don't feel like I can do the sexual part. So really thinking physical intimacy, like, are you giving them hugs? Are you trying to hold their hand when you get home at the end of the day? Are you giving each other a kiss? Are you doing things that aren't about sex?
Yeah, and there can't be have a cuddle in the hope that you're going to get sex. It's got to be a cuddle for cuddle's sake.
Does that person know that? Or do they feel like as soon as you start cuddling, you're going to try to inch in for the next thing? And so is there physical intimacy? Is there emotional intimacy? Like, are you actually hearing this person's feelings? So that person needs to lean more into the other areas of intimacy. And the person who is not into the sexual intimacy, they've got to work on still being able to hold the truth that sexual intimacy is a way to show love so that they don't become dismissive of it. Because the risk is that they start to become dismissive. All you want is sex. That's all you care about. And really being able to say to their partner, I know that this is something that helps you feel loved. And I respect that about you. And I'm not withholding it because I don't love you, because I'm not attracted to you. I'm not there right now. But I myself am going to work on seeing that as a realistic need. And I'm going to figure out what I need to do for myself so that I can feel comfortable again engaging in sexual activity.
Well, I hope that was helpful to you. We're coming towards the end of the program, so I have to ask you, as a witness on The Meaningful Life, what makes your life meaningful?
I think it's just such a cliche answer, but my family makes my life meaningful. I just love my family so much, and my children and my husband. I think often about how there's nothing else I'd want to dedicate my life to.
Interesting that they can be the source of stress and the source of meaning at the same time.
Isn't that maybe sometimes how it is, right? Like the things that really matter to us. Because if they didn't really matter to me, I would say, whatever, I'm going to go off and do whatever I want to do.
So the conversation for most people is going to finish here, but for supporters of The Meaningful Life, we're going to be discussing how to deal with hot button topics, those difficult topics that get you fighting rather than being on the same side of the team. And if you want to hear the bonus material, you can subscribe directly via Apple or Spotify. And if you want to become a supporter of The Meaningful Life and unlock the bonus material this way, here are the details.
You've been listening to The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. You can follow Andrew on Twitter, like him on Facebook, and please leave a review wherever you consume your podcasts. Making, editing, and distributing The Meaningful Life comes with substantial costs, and we'd like to ask for your help. Visit our website, andrewgmarshall.com/podcast, where you can join our supporters club and unlock bonus material for every program, send in a letter to be discussed by Andrew and his guests, and join a community of other people seeking to make their life meaningful. At the gold level, you get even more benefits. Production of The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall is by Michael Dooney. Social media by Madeleine Healy. Sound engineering and theme tune by Sebastian de la Luz Mendoza. And I'm Susie Colick. Please tell your friends and spread the word. Thank you.